for making the mold for the CIP method, first we need this rubber tube, and we also need this thicker rubber tube. The thicker rubber tube will help to hold the thinner rubber tube. The powders actually are going to be put inside the thinner rubber tube. So the first thing is that we have to cut the thinner rubber tube with the same length than the thicker mold. So be careful with that. I use very fine scissors to cut the sides of the thinner rubber tube. So I recommend you to look for these scissors. I found them in Amazon. So it's very important to have a very smooth surface. The rubber mold is placed inside the thicker mold. And then the stainless steel molds previously made in the machine shop are covered with the Teflon tape, just the bottom for the rod. And the same grab for the cap, stainless steel cap. So this is basically to tight very well the stainless steel rod inside the rubber mold. So be sure that is on center. To hold the complete mold, I use these kind of clamps. I send you one clamps, but maybe the size is not the same than the thicker rubber mold. Anyways, you still can use, or if you can find a better clamp that match perfect with your mold, that could be better. So the important is that try not to deformate the circumference of the inner rubber mold. So here I'm adding Teflon tape to the cap, stainless steel cap. Then we pack the powders inside the mold. So be sure that the stainless steel rod is perfectly centered. Sometimes when I put the clamps and tie the clamps, the rod tilt a little bit, so be sure that is perfectly in the center. Initially I just tap or just give little punches of with the spatula. First, I want to be sure that that the powders surround perfectly the stainless steel rod. So I don't tap on the countertop because sometimes the stainless steel rod is tilted. That's why I use first, initially, the spatula. So when the powders completely fill the rubber mold, I start to tap on the countertop, on the surface of the countertop. So I continue packing the powders inside the mold and tapping the mold until I observe this small gap between the cap and the rubber mold. So you can see here I'm pointing with the tip of the tweezers. So that is very important, otherwise the cap, the stainless steel cap, can touch the stainless steel rod during the high pressing. That's why I recommend you to have a small gap. So after I observe this gap, I remove the thinner mold. Sometimes I put more powders and tap a little bit more, but be careful because sometimes the tube, the mold, can be deformated. So we have to be sure that the mold is completely straight. So what I do sometimes is just to hold very to hold with my fingers, and I can feel that it's very hard, the mold. So then I use this balloon, the yellow one that you observe in the picture, to protect the mold. For CIP method, I use a container with water. So I don't want that the water go inside the mold, and you can observe that the mold is not hermetic. So I protect the mold with the balloon. So be careful because sometimes when I hold very hard the mold, the cap can just come out from the mold, and you will see a mess on the countertop. So I grab the balloon, try to remove the air inside the balloon as much as you can. And sometimes I use a vacuum pump, but if you don't have what I do is to make little holes. I use a needle. Here you can see the needle, and I just put 4 holes totally 2 holes at the bottom and 2 holes at the top. If I don't do this, the air inside will deformate completely the dead end tube. So I recommend you to do that. So that's it. It's ready for the CIP method, for the CIP procedure. Finally, after the CIP method, after the high pressure I cut the balloon to remove the mold. So you can observe on the surface of the balloon the water dry and clean a little bit the surface of the mold. And first thing is to remove the cap, stainless steel cap. You will observe very flat surface of the dead end tube. Next step is to cut the rubber tube. So I send you maybe 1 meter or 1.5 meters of this rubber tube, but as you can see, it's not reusable. So I recommend you to purchase more. You can try to remove without coating, but I think that is it's more complicated. So I recommend you to purchase these scissors. They are very sharp, very small. Very easy to handle because they have some kind of a spring. So when you push the sides, they return to the original position. So it's very easy to handle. We have to be very patient during this step because there is a risk to damage the tube. You see the scissors. Yeah, you push them and they return to the original position. So now that we remove the rubber, we can remove the rod. You don't need to tap anything, just turn a little bit and pull off the tube. You will see that it's very rounded. However, there are some deformations at the top, the same than your samples. It's very strict, but anyways, we have to polish the surface. And so that's it. Oh, I use more or less like 5 grams, between 5 or 6 per unit. Remember, the most important is that you need to observe the gap between the cap, the stainless steel cap, and the rubber mold. In that way, you will be sure